Hey, what's going on? This is Gemini Exotica, and today I put together something outside of comedy and jokes. Maybe a little bit of an essay, possibly. Just kind of, I started writing a little bit, and I thought it would make a pretty cool video. So, this video is titled Analyzing the Roots to Your Fear. And this is what I wrote. So, I created this channel mainly for jokes, but I wanted to branch out into other areas. And this subject is relevant to me, and I find it very interesting. So I figured for the first video outside of straight comedic material, I would begin here. Where is here? Well, it basically is fear, and specifically your personal rooted fear. I believe there is a difference between fear itself and the root to that fear. For example, people see a rat and scream. The same people may see a spider and could care less. So I'm interested in why that is, right? Why does the rat induce fear but the spider doesn't? Maybe when this person was a child, their mom was feeding them and a rat ran through the kitchen. The mom screamed, so the child understood rats are scary. So for this example, the rat is fear, but the memory is the root to that fear, right? So the point is, fear doesn't just generally exist, right? It has a history inside of you. It can be rooted in your genetics, your upbringing, your experiences, even your goals, right? So what you fear is almost like a handprint in that it is entirely unique to you. That being said, what I want to do with this video is explain my thoughts on fear, explain one of my fears, and show you a technique I use to backtrack through that fear's history. So, first and foremost, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist or anything like that. I'm simply just a guy who I feel has lived with a certain threshold of anxiety for most of my adult life, right? To put it into context, at times, my anxiety got so bad I was waking up in the morning basically in a panic attack. My first conscious moments in the morning were like, Jesus Christ, I am dying. Like some people wake up to pee in the bed or sunshine in the window or, their dog humping them. And I was waking up to like full-blown panic attack, like as if someone took me in my mattress into a plane and threw me out of the plane with a parachute on, and I woke up free falling, But it was getting to the point where like I was so afraid to wake up for some reason and like start the day that I would become semi-conscious in the morning and begin to feel intense dread in a dreamlike state, waiting for the alarm to go off. Overall, this mental state led me to get interested in fear and try to figure out why I was so afraid and essentially try to figure out ways to control it, to ultimately benefit my life. So before I jump ahead, just to give a background on fear so we all know the science behind it, right? Fear is entirely natural, right? Fear was part of life's evolution to prepare us for dangerous encounters in the wild. So those people that have quote-unquote no fear, they're actually not evolved. Odds are they're being eaten by a tiger, T-Rex, or whatever. But there are some people that can control their fear, and that's an extreme evolution, right? But the point is, fear allows humans to prepare for dangerous encounters, right? And the way we fear works basically like this, right? We're in a world, and then there's some kind of stimulus. Our brain senses that some unanticipated risk has entered our life. Hormones are pumped into our bloodstream, and we begin to feel afraid. So fear is just what we use to describe our body getting into extreme ultimate defense mode, which is essentially fight or flight. But I mean, we can't fly, so I don't even get that last part. I guess it should be fight or run, or maybe even fight or start running, then take 8 steps and get chased down by a big cat and have your face mauled off. I mean, I gotta throw some jokes in here. It can't be all seriousness. But in the modern world, we don't have exactly the same stimulus as our ancestors, right? However, fear still arises in many situations. It can be basic, like talking to a stranger you find attractive. It can be complex. You need to decide to move to a new city or not. It can be all in your mind. You're deciding to upload a YouTube video and think you sound stupid. It could be very real. You're standing on the edge of a cliff with your girlfriend and your girl is a bit pushy. I'm not talking she'll push you off the cliff. I'm just saying after hearing her talk about, taking the relationship to the next level, you're going to want to jump off. But what is interesting to me is when fear crosses over from physical stimulus to mental stimulus. Because as mentioned before, the basic theory is that there is some environmental stimulus. Our brain realizes risk and fears the reaction. Well, what if the stimulus is not from the world, but from our own minds? And to me, this is where it gets a bit weird, because fear stimulus is not so black and white. Fear stimulus seems to transcend physicality. It transcends time. It even transcends logic. When it comes to fear, your brain is like a time-traveling, dimension-changing, anxiety-ridden, organic supercomputer weighing every possible scenario on how you could screw things up and never amount to anything. Now, I think physical stimulus should be the least of our fears when it comes to fear, because when there is a physical stimulus, we can't really control for that, right? How can we control for the fact that we turn the corner and a gigantic lion with 9 heads from outer space is staring us down with an erection? Simultaneously, it is speaking Japanese, but we can understand it because it's also psychic, and it says that it's going to eat us and bang us at the same time. Running into a lion and our brain reacting to that, right, we can't really control. We can control it. Don't go on hikes alone in the Serengeti. But my point is that that's a real situation. It makes sense why our brain will be afraid. But, and this is getting into my fear, right? Why do sometimes I psych myself out, right? For me, why am I so scared to hit the record button on my laptop to make a comedy podcast or a YouTube video? Why do I tell myself that I'm foolish or stupid? Why, when I talk into the mic, I can't speak clearly and I feel nervous, right? After all, I'm recording alone in my room, and there is no contract that says I even have to upload what I record. Essentially, there's no real physical stimulus creating the anxiety. It is all mental. And that is where I believe uncovering the roots of our fear is important, because the mental fear stimulus is not real. They exist in our mind, directly inside of ourselves, right? And you know how they say the best hiding place is right under your nose. Well, the best hiding place for fear is right behind your nose, in our small, smooth, monkey brains. So what I think, and this is my thoughts, so it could be entirely wrong, and if it is, please tell me, because I wish to learn. But what I think is the fear that we conjure up, that is no physical stimulus, but our brains having an episode of pure panic, is the fear embedded in us from past memories or the fear of future unknowns. In terms of the past has created a format for what we fear and what sticks to us. Those fears are always in our mind, and our brain is ready to associate panic to anything that slightly resembles those fears. In terms of the future is naturally risky, and the fact that it is entirely unpredictable freaks our brain out. But what is interesting is that both the past and the future are to a certain degree uncontrollable. We can't change the past, we don't know what's happening tomorrow. And that's where I believe the brain loses sight of physical versus mental. As mentioned before, our brain expresses fear to a stimulus. The stimulus is equal to us losing control. So essentially, a loss of control creates fear. Again, there is no possible way to control either the future or the past. Now, our brain doesn't know what physical or mental is. Our brain doesn't know the difference between a lion or our thoughts, future, present, memory, or current. It's all just stimulus. And if that stimulus has a sense that power is lost and we are in an uncontrollable situation, the brain reacts and we feel fear. So accounting for all this craziness, we get into the idea of the roots of our fears. And that is essentially where our fears start. Because fear typically ends with us locking ourselves in the bathroom and throwing up in the toilet while crying. Where they start is what I consider the roots of fear. And I'll explain to you my roots for fear in my life and how I found them out. And maybe you can also apply this to your life, right? So again, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. If anything, I'm an autist. So I suggest people find professional help for their emotional issues, but I feel at the end of the day, you can make a lot of headway with your fears on your own. So for me, it started with basically writing out how I felt. And this is very common, and this isn't the point of the video. It's just where I started. I suggest when writing, use as much time as needed and going into extreme details. You'll be surprised with how much thoughts actually exist in your brain when you start transferring it to paper. And, once it's on paper, it's like those thoughts are now manageable bits of data that you can then analyze. And don't just write and read. Read what you wrote and comprehend it. You'll be seeing themes and strings. Themes being similarities in content in the constant thoughts, and strings being like a process to your thoughts, almost like steps. For example, often when you think of thought A, you always find yourself thinking of thought B. But what I started doing that really optimized my writing, gets journaling, and what helped me the most is what I called the 5 whys, right? And this isn't groundbreaking stuff, but sometimes, a simple solution is just what's needed. And the reality is, this is used, the 5 whys, this is used in all types of businesses. And I even learned about it in training for my work. But in business, companies use the 5 whys to understand the catalyst of a problem. So it's essentially backtracking and testing all possible avenues until one finds an answer to the problem. So, for example, and this is a hypothetical example. Our store always runs low on supplies. So we ask why. We question the staff, and they say that they have issues entering supplies bought and sold into our system. We ask them why that is. They say the computer is old and slow and crashes often. Okay, so the solution is we need to update our systems to correct our supplies issue, right? And this analysis may be more or less than 5 steps. It's completely up to you. But for me, I think it's extremely helpful in getting to the root of the problem, right? And it could be extremely helpful in getting to the root of the fear. So my problem was essentially that I'm nervous to record, right? I will walk you through, how I discovered the roots of my fear for recording, right? So 1, I'm afraid to record. Why? 2, I am nervous. Why? 3, I think my material is not funny. Why? 4, well, it's not that I think my material is not funny. I'm afraid it's not good enough to get people to watch it. Why? 5, I'm afraid people won't watch it, and I really want people to watch it. Why? 6, because I want to build a following and entertain others. Why? 7, I like stand-up comedy, and I want to make a career out of it. Why does that affect recording, though? 8, having an online following or a following in general will help with one's stand-up career, so the content I make needs to be good to build that following and continue that dream. So I guess this may seem very basic, but it actually took me a while to truly unpack the root of that recording fear, and to unpack why I even want to become a stand-up comedian is an entire bag of hammers. But I never connected my goal to become a stand-up comedian to the fear of recording, right? I just figured I was shy or embarrassed or stupid. And you will often find that those terms are like a blanket to the real issues at hand. But in hindsight, that connection makes sense. But in hindsight, the answer always looks so obvious, right? You know what I mean? But overall, because I want to become a stand-up comic so bad, I'm afraid to record now. And I know that building an online following can assist in my stand-up career, so that pressure to achieve is making me nervous because I'm afraid that my content won't be good enough to amass a following, making that dream of becoming a stand-up career or a stand-up comedian more distant, right? I also think that the sense of the unpredictable future is also a big part in this. Just a combination of my dreams and the unpredictability is just making me very nervous to take the first steps now. So my fear was to record, but the roots of my fear is that I'm afraid of ultimately hindering my chances of doing stand-up comedy as a career. So I'm stressing out to perform. Now, going forward, it is hard not to be nervous to record, as I can't predict my future in comedy, and the simple fact is the material and content need to be good, right? But now, whenever I record, I don't think, why am I so nervous? I think, I'm nervous because I want to make this really good, right? But that simple fact of understanding myself and my emotions calms me down. At that point, I feel I'm in control of myself, right? I understand where the thoughts are coming from. Sure, I can't really help it other than aiming to do my best, but at least I understand it versus just being in a panic state praying for answers, So in conclusion, fear is entirely natural and often a good thing. It alerts us to changes in our environment. We have a sixth sense towards a creepy person. We know what places are dangerous versus safe. But sometimes that instinct bleeds over. That results in our brains creating unnecessary anxiety. Ultimately, being able to break down the fears and getting to the roots of those fears allows us to understand our fears better. And when we understand our fears, we can create solutions for them. Ultimately, when you are in control of yourself, you can feel confident and move forward with authority, right? And and honestly, that situation seems a lot better than hyperventilating in your room because you're thinking you'll never write a good joke, right? That happened a lot. It really doesn't anymore. And I think it's because, I just try to get to the root of my fears. But that's all I got. Thank you for listening. This is Gemini Exotica. Have a great day.